All right, this book is called The Cloud Spinner. It was written by Michael Catchpool, and the pictures were done by Allison J, and it has beautiful pictures. There was once a boy who could weave cloth from the clouds. He had a spinning wheel and a loom on top of a hill. As the clouds passed with the whir of the wheel, he would spin them into thread, gold in the morning with the rising sun, white in the afternoon, and crimson in the evening, just as his mother had taught him. Then, with a clickety-clack of his loom, he would weave the thread into cloth. As he worked, he sang a simple tune his mother had taught him. Enough is enough, and not one stitch more. The boy was wise. He spun just enough thread and wove just enough cloth to make 2 scarves. One of pure white he wore over his head when it was hot to protect him from the sun. The other he wore when it was cold. It was a twist and a twirl of gold, and white and crimson, soft as a mouse's touch, and warm as roasted chestnuts. His mother had taught him well. One chilly market day, the boy walked down the hill, a basket in his hand and a scarf around his neck. The market was full of great excitement. The king was on his way. Soon the king rode grandly by, hardly noticing the curtsies and cheers, but what his greedy eyes did notice was the wonderful scarf of gold and white and crimson. So here's our boy, and here's the king on his big horse. Tell me, boy, where can I get a scarf of such fine cloth? Nowhere on earth, the boy replied. Then how did you get yours? Snapped the king. I made it, the boy said. Then you will make another for me, a longer one, much longer, for I am the king. But the boy said, It would not be wise to have a long scarf made from this cloth. Your Majesty does not need it. How dare you tell me what is wise? Shouted the king. I order you to make my scarf. See him pointing at the boy? And the boy has a very sad look on his face. The boy knows that it is not wise. So the boy went home to the top of the hill, and with the whir of the wheel began to spin. He spun the clouds as they passed in the morning and were gold with the rising sun. He spun in the afternoon as the clouds sailed past, white as snowdrifts. He spun in the evening when the clouds were crimson. Then, with the clickety-clack of the loom, he wove the thread into a long, long scarf. The king was overjoyed. His scarf was soft as a mouse's touch and as warm as roasted chestnuts. Now make me a cloak of this glorious cloth, he ordered, and dresses galore for the queen and my daughter, the princess. Look at the boy's face, though. The boy looks unhappy. He knows it is not wise. The king is very demanding and greedy. The boy shook his head. It would not be wise to have so many clothes made from this cloth. Your Majesty does not need them. The king's face was a twist of scowls. I want those clothes, and I order you to make them. So the boy went home to the top of the hill, and with a whir of his wheel, began to spin. He spun the clouds as they passed in the morning and were gold with the rising sun. He spun in the afternoon as the clouds sailed past, white as snowdrifts. Do we notice what's happening with the clouds, though? There's a lot of clouds here, not so many here, and very few here. He spun, and it got harder and harder, for soon there were fewer and fewer clouds. At last, with a clickety-clack of the loom, the boy began to weave the thread into cloth. beneath the cloudless sky. And as he worked, he sadly sang, "Enough is enough and not one stitch more." See how our story's looking a little broken? Looks like it's cracking. The king was delighted. He put on the wonderful cloak, and the queen and the princess each put on a beautiful flowing dress. "Surely," he boasted, "there is no other king as magnificent and wise as me." "Not one," said the queen. The princess said nothing. See the princess? She looks unhappy too. But day after day, as they wore their marvelous clothes, not one drop of rain fell from the cloudless sky. See, there's no clouds. "Your Majesty," pleaded the villagers, "our animals are thirsty and our crops are all dying." "There's nothing I can do," shouted the king, walking this way and that, his cloak trailing behind him. "Why are you moaning to me?" The princess said nothing. But that evening, she quietly slipped out of the palace. She wore a simple dress, and in her arms was a bundle soft as a mouse's touch and warm as roasted chestnuts. She crossed the dry, dusty gardens and the brown fields beyond and climbed to the top of the hill. Stepping forward, she knocked at the boy's door. "Is it too late to undo what has been done?" The boy smiled and said simply, "There is still time." When the king awoke the next morning, he could not find his wonderful cloak. The queen could not find her beautiful dresses. They searched the palace for the clothes that the boy had made, but they were gone. While outside, the villagers danced for joy as the rain began to fall from the clouds in the sky, and it rained and rained and rained. The king and the queen looked out and wondered. And the princess, with a smile as bright as a rainbow, stood on top of the hill and sang, "Enough is enough and not one stitch more." And there's our boy and the princess, and they're very happy. The end.